Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Starter Day. Please welcome Jay Simons.
Woo! All right, thanks for coming. Welcome to Starter Day. I haven't seen this many iPads since WWDC. This must be the crew that's not quite cool enough to go to WWDC, maybe. So I'm really excited to welcome everybody to Starter Day. We've got, I think, a really jam-packed afternoon for you. We've crammed a lot in, so stick with us. Quick intro just to set up the event. Naturally, this is an event where we want to celebrate the art of bootstrapping and the art of starting companies. I think many of you are probably entrepreneurs or, like me, dream of one day being an entrepreneur. 9 months ago, we launched our starter licenses, which are 10-user licenses of our products, Atlassian products that we sell for $10. And the goal was to help small teams, small companies get started. And every dollar that's spent on those licenses, we also donate on your behalf to Room to Read. So since we launched 9 months ago, we've sold over 50,000 of those licenses and together raised over $500,000 to help build schools and books in the developing world. And this was, thank you. This event was a tribute to that effort, but also an opportunity for starter license holders in the community to get together and talk about the great adventure in building companies. So to do that, we brought together 8 stories from 8 truly incredible companies, and some of the pioneers in those companies that basically helped get them and get the companies to where they are today. So with that, let me start, and it's my pleasure to introduce the 2 guys that actually signed my paycheck. So I better choose my words carefully. But working at Atlassian for me is equal parts joy and MBA program. I feel like I learn so much every day. And these 2 speakers, Mike Cannon-Brooks and Scott Farquhar, the founders of Atlassian, have created a truly incredible company that I'm certainly proud to work at. And I've been lucky enough to be a part of it and help it grow. So Mike and Scott are going to come up on stage and sort of set the stage for the day and talk about the art of bootstrapping. So Mike and Scott from Atlassian.
Here we go. All right, welcome everybody. Am I on? Yes. The one thing Jay doesn't tell you is he is very much a part of our story. He's a little humble. All of this event wouldn't be here without him. So big round of thanks to Jay and the Atlassian marketing team for putting this on. So we're here a little bit to tell you about the art of the bootstrap, which is a bit of a daunting topic, I have to say, for us to say. We've just kind of, well, we would consider that we've made a lot of this stuff up as we went along. But let's look back. We're trying to look back at the last 8 years and really give you some of the lessons of the things that we've collectively learned along the way. So for those of you who don't know Atlassian, assume you maybe have some idea what we do. We basically make kick-ass tools for software teams to enable them to ship software more quickly and to build really quality things. If you want more information on Atlassian, check out the website. That's pretty much the only pitch you'll get on us. So we decided to put together 10 rules, was an easy way to break it down. 10 rules that we have learned along the way that are really important for bootstrapping. The first one really is start with 2 people, right? This is really a generic startup lesson, but if you look at the successful startups, they really almost always have 2 founders. It's almost like your odds of success go up tenfold if you have 2 starters, right? You can go to Google, to Yahoo, to Microsoft, to Oracle. They all have multiple founders. So why do you have multiple founders? Well, the first is really to share the low points, right? It's a pretty tough time to get through the period of time that you have to build your startup. And we've certainly had our share of low points. And it's wonderful to have 2 people because when you get really low at the top of the pyramid, the guy next to you says, mate, it's not that bad. He picks you up and you keep on running. The second part is obviously to share the high points, right? It's a very unique journey that you go on as a startup founder. And to have somebody else kind of alongside you the whole way who has shared the whole journey, has been through the low points and through the high points is a really wonderful thing. It's very hard to communicate the journey that you go on to other people. And having someone who's on the same journey is incredibly valuable. And it's also good to have employees who are willing to make fun of you. This was what someone decided to make fun of us, and thanks to all the Atlassian employees who did that. And the other part of that is really, it's very hard to have two founders unless you have 50-50. That's my personal opinion. Having 60-40, 70-30, it's going to lead to problems down the way. So where possible, just going to try to make it 50-50. It means you're in the same boat, you're paddling at the same speed. From there on, it's hopefully smoothly down the river.
So when you're a startup, when you're a bootstrapper, you need a strong business model. Now, big companies have capital, they've got large numbers of employees, they've got distribution, they've got branding, and you guys have, well, we had none of that. We had absolutely nothing. We just had an idea. But a lot of companies that I sort of help out with, I find that they don't have a business model that will really ever end up making money. They haven't really thought it through. Okay, what do we, as well as our product, how do we eventually make money from what we do? And the Atlassian model evolved over time. So I'm not sure if anyone remembers time, pre-Twitter, pre-Facebook, maybe sort of the early dawn of the internet, 2001, 2002. Back then, enterprise software was sold, on a golf course, expensive salespeople. You ended up getting huge amounts of discounting. No one ever paid list price. You always felt like you were kind of getting screwed. Did you get the best price? Everyone got a different price depending on whether you're a big company or a small company. And we found all these big companies, even though they sold lots of products, half their money came from professional services. The model we took, which was, seems to be quite common these days, but back then was new, is simple products. We sold them online. Basically no salespeople, no discounting. We put our prices up publicly, so everyone got the same price. And so our model has basically evolved over time. We're in Australia. I mean, you can probably tell from our accents, we're not from around here. And we realized in Australia, we're a long way from the rest of the world. So we needed a product that could sell itself. And if it was going to sell itself, we found that there's a price point, basically, where within a company, $5,000 to $10,000, people can expense, people can put on their credit card. But once you've cracked $5,000 or $10,000, not only did you have to sell it to the person you wanted to sell it to, he had to sell it to his boss and then her boss and then all the way up the chain. So suddenly between $10,000 and $20,000, you needed a lot more salespeople. So we basically had to make it affordable so that people could buy it without having to think about it too much. Now, if we were going to sell it relatively cheaply, we had to sell a large number of these things because obviously we don't want to, we want to stay having fun in this company and not have to go back to what were previously our day jobs. So we had to sell globally. And if we're going to sell globally, we had to put our prices on the internet. We couldn't do sales calls. We couldn't, do in-person demos. So our model kind of evolved over time. And sort of from that is the open company part. We had to put our prices up online, be very transparent, or our documentation or our sales collateral ended up being online. So that's kind of how our business model evolved. And we're, I guess, sort of lucked into it a little bit because it sort of evolved as its own accord.
I think the key point, just to reinforce that, is you've got to have a model that supports bootstrapping. A lot of people have models that don't support bootstrapping. We happen to have one that should work. If we're advising a company and they don't have one that supports it, we'll try to tell them that. The third thing that we did really well is we used our own product every day, right? And it's kind of, again, a little bit generic startup advice, but even more important if you're bootstrapping, right? If you're not your customer's number one customer, you're going to really struggle to evolve that product very well because the time taken to go out to talk to all the customers in the early stages is going to be really, really painful. So it's just a simple one, but we use all our own products all over the place. Sometimes this is painful for us when they break and when they go down, but at the same time it means we fix them much more quickly and we experience basically customer pain firsthand. And we're the people that want to drive it forward, right? We're the people that every day are thinking, we wish the product did X, we wish the product did Y, because it's going to be a feature or an add-on to the product that's going to help us in our own business. So if it helps us, it's probably going to help somebody else. So if you've seen Atlassian using all our own stuff online, that's the exact reason, because we believe we are our own best customer.
So we like to measure everything at Atlassian. We think as a small business, you need to understand exactly where your sales are coming from. You need to understand exactly where you're spending all your money. And we use Confluence internally, not only to sort of track all our information, but we share it with our entire company. And we think it's it's really important as a startup and as a bootstrapper to really understand what your business is doing so you can make great decisions. I'm a bit of a metrics Nazi, is what I've been labelled internally, but and even years on now, we still don't know certain key decisions or certain key information around why do customers buy from us, where do they come from, and we spent years tracking it down. Of course, I wish, as an engineer, I like to think there's a perfect decision, a perfect solution for every problem, and it irks me as an engineer that I can't categorically say, yep, that was the right decision to make based on the information. You always end up running imperfect information in a startup, and if you don't make decisions, you're running too slow. But to kind of mitigate that, what we've done at Atlassian is we've taken the approach of testing everything. Now, we had a few years ago, we were spending about $30,000 a month on Google ads, and using Google's analytical system, we couldn't actually see that was converting to sales for us. Like, wow, we're putting $30,000, tipping that money in every month, and at the bottom, well, we're getting sales, but we can't link up whether they came from Google or not. And we thought, well, how do we work out whether we can turn it off or not? What metrics can we do? How do we change the website? And eventually we said, well, how about we just turn them off completely and see if we still get the same number of sales? And so 3 months later, we realized that, yep, we couldn't measure it through Google. We couldn't see that they were coming directly from Google. When we turned them off, our sales plummeted. And so we quickly scrambled and turned them all back on. But we could have spent years sort of analyzing that, and we kind of worked it out. Another one from recently is the starter licenses that we have, the $10 ones you may be familiar with, perhaps you bought them. And before that, we were thinking, well, we want to do this. We want to give out these starter licenses to small companies, but we're not sure what the impact is going to be on us from a support perspective and from processing that number of orders and from, what's the demand look like from these customers. So again, we could have tried to model it. We could have asked a whole bunch of people, done surveys, and we said, well, how about we just do it for 5 days, right? Like, how about we do it for 5 days and tell everyone that we will turn it off? So instead, we had a 5-day promotion. We basically gave $5 licenses for 5 users for 5 days. And we ended up raising $100,000 in that week. And we worked out that, over the coming months, we worked out exactly how much support load those guys caused. So when 6 months later, when we launched our $10 licenses, we knew we could model exactly how much support load we'd need. And probably the final example we have is, and a bigger one is, you think opening an office is a pretty big mistake to make, if you open it in the wrong location. And so about 4 years ago, we had a hypothesis that we should move to the States because that's where, or open an office in the States because that's where most of our customers are. And our hypothesis was that we need to be in the time zone so we could call them and answer their emails in the right time zone, but also so we could walk down the road and chat with them and see, okay, well, how they use our product and have in-person interviews. So we went to New York where most of our customers were. And we found that that being there and having that first interview was great. We could talk with our customers, but after we'd caught up with them once, we never really needed to catch up with them again. They didn't care where we were. We could have been East Coast, West Coast, Brazil, Canada. They didn't care at all. So about 6 months after that, we moved the entire office over to the West Coast where we could hire better sort of caliber of people, more people who are interested in working for a company like ours. So even with opening offices, we sort of tipped our toe in the water.
It's a pretty painful mistake because I got to live in New York for 9 months. It was all right. So always be marketing would be, if I had to pick one lesson from myself personally, Scott might have a different one, this would be the biggest one, is that as a bootstrapped startup, you have to be marketing every single day, almost every single minute. You have to turn everything you can into a marketing opportunity, right? You guys are here, we're trying to do it right now. You're an example of how we're trying to turn the starter licenses into somewhat of a marketing opportunity for ourselves. So I'm going to take you through a couple of examples of where we've done sort of unconventional marketing that have worked well for us. Starting with obviously our sort of 404 or down page, right? It comes up with the Charlie and everyone's looking at it, oh, the website's down, and then he electrocutes himself and they think, well, at least that's pretty funny, And it works pretty well. People Twitter about it, hey, check out the down page. So we've always tried to make our marketing very loud and very unique, right? Again, as a bootstrap startup, you don't have a large budget to spend on advertising, so you have to make people remember your company in some way, and we've tried to be really unique in a whole lot of things that we have done. One particular example here is we bought a lot of beer for a lot of people, right? And it's not particularly unique, but we've tried to do it in unique ways when we're just buying beer. It's a classic marketing technique, right? Get everyone a bit hammered. But we won't claim we're sophisticated at being loud. So what we did is, this is a conference in Belgium where there's a large podcast called the Java Posse, and we know the guys quite well. They're in our community. We started very much in the Java space. And so we thought, you know what, we'll just have a go at this. So we asked them, would you mind if we gave beer to your session? It's like 4 o'clock in a large conference in Belgium. And they said, no, sure, whatever. So we got in our little rental car. We tootled off to the local supermarket. We just paid cash and bought I think 15 cases of beer, brought them back. Couldn't cool them because we didn't have anywhere to cool them at the conference, so we just left them in the car outside in Belgium. It's like 2 degrees in December. Left the windows open just to crack to cool the beers. Took them all out, slapped an Atlassian sticker on them and handed them out. And I swear I got us more tweets for that, like $500 than anything that we had done up to that point. So buy people beer, try to be a bit unique. The other thing we do is we ship something very tangible. We're a totally electronic company, right? We realized very early our website is our only storefront. Their only interaction with us is to download, customers download a piece of software, they use the website, hopefully they buy, maybe they use support. It can be a totally virtual experience. And very early we tried to change this. So anyone who bought when we first had different versions of the software, the most expensive version, we didn't have enough features to throw into it on day one. We were going to add them over time. We were sure it was going to add value. We thought from day one, well, you know what, if people are going to shell out $5,000, we'll fling them a t-shirt. So we said, wherever you are in the world, we'll ship you a t-shirt. And people started buying the most expensive version to get the t-shirt. Right? They'd spend another $2,500 and then email us and say, where is my t-shirt? And we're like, well, we're sending it to Mongolia. It's going to be there pretty soon. They'd expect it to be overnight. We're not quite Amazon yet. But the rule with our t-shirts was we quickly made them very amusing. Right? If you make tech t-shirts, again, it's an old school marketing ploy, but make sure people are going to wear them. Right? So we have now made hundreds and hundreds of t-shirts. I pulled about 15 images. I tried to pull 100 and Keynote died. So we make t-shirts for absolutely everything. We make t-shirts for other people. We're almost an outsourced t-shirt manufacturer at times, right? We'll make t-shirts for people's conferences, different teams internally, and it becomes a thing that people wear. And when you see someone walking down the street with one of your t-shirts on, you think, wow, look at all that free marketing that we got just because we made the t-shirt actually work, right? And the last thing we do is we try to make everything we do into some sort of a marketing campaign. So marketing is not just for attracting customers, especially if you're a bootstrapped startup. So we try to market to potential employees as well, and that's really important. These are the guys you want to come and they want to understand your business because presumably it's a pretty cool place to work. You want them to come work for you. So if you go to our website and learn about working at Atlassian, you'll see we put up videos with employees, we put up photos of the desk, photos of the office, try to really give you the experience of what it's like to work here so that you're more attracted to apply for a job with us. When we were hiring a whole lot of engineers in Sydney, in the middle of the GFC, our HR director said, hang on a sec, why don't we turn this into a big marketing event, right? We're hiring people in the middle of a downturn. This is very unusual. Let's go to the press. Let's get people to talk about it. And we blew past the 32 we were trying to hire. I think it was well over 40. And we made it into a real campaign with reasons to join, little bonuses. We gave everyone a holiday when they came on board if they've joined as part of that campaign. Little things in terms of marketing to potential employees, just as important. And then once they join, it's also important to not stop the marketing, right? So on your first day at Atlassian, when you turn up, you get a box of chocolates on your desk, your computer's already set up, there's no sort of turn up, oh, here, find yourself a chair, you get a bad experience from day one. You get your t-shirt, you get everything kind of reset up from day one, so you think, wow, what a great experience. And actually, it's about 3 weeks ago, someone sent through an email, which we had to put up, just basically saying, one of my housemates had his first day at Atlassian, right? And I won't read the whole thing, but basically he had a desk, he had chocolates on it, and he kind of went home and talked to his housemate about what an awesome experience he'd had. And his housemate sent us an email just to say, I thought you guys should know this, that it really made a difference. That someone came home and said, wow, this is awesome, right? So it makes a big difference, even the little things you can do when people start. We have had some marketing fails, though. You can be a little too clever. So we tried this one, which was for our developer conference Atlas Camp. We put up this, and the little zeros and ones are actually a bit.ly URL. If you decoded them all and put the bit.ly URL together, you got a free ticket, and nobody figured it out. A little too clever. We thought it was really cool. We were waiting, and then it just never happened. So there you go. That's an exclusive, by the way, for this conference. Even yesterday, there were people who hadn't figured it out.
So our experience is that your first idea will often fail. Now, by fail, it may not, go down in a, flaming wreck, but basically you evolve your idea, whether it's into a different form or whether it's into a completely different company. Evan Williams is probably a good example of this. He he started a company called Pyra Labs a while ago, and then you probably haven't heard it that much because that morphed into a thing called Blogger as his little side project, which eventually got bought by Google, and then so he left that and decided to start an RSS sort of audio-visual syndication company called Odeo. And then that's not as famous because as a side project, he sort of started this thing called Twitter. And so it's often your side projects that end up being your big thing. We found this ourselves. This is our website. I pulled it from the Internet Archive circa 2001. And
awesome.
the color scheme is fantastic. If we hadn't, back then we were doing support for an application server. There's these guys in Sweden that made a Java application server, 2 guys, and they made it back when Sun had just first released the spec. And these guys were selling a reasonable amount, but they didn't provide any support. They just sort of shoved the product out there and didn't provide any documentation, any support. And we thought, wow, there's a market opportunity there. Of course, we were in Australia, so anyone who called us for support was calling us in the middle of the night. We'd get the phone, our cell phones would get a text message, and we'd get up at 3 in the morning and call the customer back. And we couldn't actually influence the product. So if it had lots of bugs, then we couldn't fix that for any of the customers. And we didn't get the source code, so we couldn't really even debug the problems that they were having. So it was kind of a terrible, terrible business idea. And luckily, we had a side project. And over the years, our side project evolved. So, support to Jira, and now we've got a lot of side projects, and that became our next business. So if we hadn't sort of failed at doing Ryan support, if it had been a marginally successful business, we probably wouldn't be standing here today. So we're pretty proud of the fact that our first idea failed.
So the other thing we've done, which is a little different, and I, sorry to impinge on the Valley, but it's a very common Valley phenomenon, is this sort of short-term thinking about your company, right? It's kind of, I'm going to build it to a certain level and then I'm going to sell it to somebody else, which is all well and good. It's a great outcome for you, right? But the thing is, often at times you forget like actually making any money along the way, or what really gives people value, right, in terms of long-term thinking. So we've been quite different. I mean, we came from the other side of the world where if we tried to raise any money as 2 21-year-old guys saying we're going to build a new issue tracker, people would be like, yeah, I'm going to give you some money for that. With no prior experience. But we had very long-term thinking. So we tried to make revenue from kind of day one, right? Actually make dollars, sell some things, which is a little bit unusual. We also put in place a very clear mission from day one, right? We just wanted to be really good and excellent at whatever we did, right? And we made sure that we sort of never dropped the standards, whether it came to hiring people or whether it came to the software that we were building or the support that we were giving people. That excellence was kind of baked in from day one, and that takes a lot of cost, and there's a lot of very long-term investments you have to put in place to make that happen. We wrote this mission statement on day -10. I can't remember where it was written, to be honest. It was probably in a coffee shop or something. We were sitting around, and we were just kind of bullshitting at the time, to be honest, right? We thought, this is the kind of company that we want to work at. This is the kind of company that we want to build. Right? 8 years later, it's pretty much the type of company that we have, which is just amazing to me that we, I'm not going to claim we had any foresight, but we knew what we wanted to get to, and it was a very long-term vision of where we wanted to get. We kind of just walked along the way, and this is, I'm pretty happy to stand here and say this is pretty much the exact type of company that we have built so far. We've simplified that since to have a purpose for the business, which is basically to create useful products that people lust after. Right? And the purpose is purposefully axiomatic. So creating useful products is like building a German car. It works all the time, but it's not particularly sexy, right? And creating lustful products is more like creating an Italian car. So you've got some sort of a Ferrari, which is everybody wants one, but it's very hard to even get it to the coffee shop, right? It's going to break down all the time. And the purpose for having both of these in the business is that people are trying to do both at the same time. Hopefully we end up somewhere in the middle and they do a good job at both things. We also had a very lofty goal, right? We set this goal on day one. Ironically, the goal was set, I'll tell you how, because we thought $100 million was a really big business. We thought we could probably make about $2,000 a customer in our model, so we just divided through and ended up with 50,000 customers and thought, that'll do, that's a big enough number. That'll take us 10 years to get to. Let's put that number up, have it on the wall, and just aim at it for a very long period of time, right? We didn't think what our goal is to sell to Google in a year's time. We thought, where do we want to get to in 10 years' time? And we thought, geez, if we could impact 50,000 software development teams around the world, that'd be awesome. Let's do that.
So as a company grows, you need to know when to switch gears. Everyone's kind of fond of those first startup days when, for us, it was when 3 of us shared one hotel room at the Mossa Hotel just down the road. I think it was $48 a night. There was 2 single beds and one of us was sleeping on the floor. With shared bathrooms too. You didn't get bathrooms for that. So everyone sort of loves and looks back on those early startup days with wishful thinking of can we get back there. But there's a time, maybe not. But there's a time when you grow and you have to spend more money and you have to sort of loosen the reins a little bit and switch into the next gear. Example for that in Sydney, you guys in the States may not know this, but the rest of the world has to pay for bandwidth. And we pay it to the States and we pay it from the States. And it's quite expensive. And I was like, we should, reduce that cost to make sure that we, a startup mentality. And then, Mike basically like, no, fuck it, we should just have unlimited bandwidth. We're at a big enough company at the moment, we should splash out. And that was exactly the right thing to do. We needed to sort of switch gears and spend more and loosen up. One of the more painful areas for us switching gears was moving from generalists to specialists. So when you start, you want a team of generalists. You want people that can answer the phone, talk to customers, do sales demos, write the website up and the marketing copy, do support, and if they have time, code on the product at the same time. So you want those generalists, and we did an awesome job of hiring some of the best generalists. But over time, you need to start specializing. You realize that software developers aren't necessarily the best people to handle, customer service calls. They can answer the problem, but they don't necessarily answer it in the way that you want, someone to communicate. So we, specialized in support and started building specializations. And one of the specializations that's really painful for us is introducing management. Because for a long time, it was me and Mike and then a whole bunch of people who would just sort of report into us. And then that got really painful. And we had to introduce a line of management. And I guess sort of as the company grows, we had to sort of let go of the fact that we needed to be across every little detail. Of course, as you grow, people may not grow with the job. We found that the hardest problem for us was we found people who were awesome from 0 to 50. People that had grown the business from 0 people to 50 people and did an absolutely rock star job. But they weren't the right person to take the business from 200 to 2,000 people. Like their skill was in that small team. And unfortunately, and it's the hardest thing any entrepreneur has to do, is letting people go. I can remember every single day that I've had to let someone go, and we think we've let it go about 30 people over the time we've run the business. And the hardest part is the rock stars, the people who are rock stars at the start, and you let them go, and their teams are like, "Why'd you let this guy go? He was awesome. For years, he's been awesome." And then when you get the new person in to replace them, they're like, "Wow, why didn't you let this guy go earlier? Like, why were you waiting so long? This new person does an awesome job." So we've kind of had to learn to let people go, and I still don't know if there's a good way to let people go with respect, like in terms of celebrate the fact that they did an awesome job as a rock star in a small company, but aren't ready for the next stage.
Definitely say it's the hardest thing that you have to do. Just reiterate that. You have to do it, but it's very, very difficult. The last lesson from my side really is a simple one, and that's basically building somewhere that you want to work, right? This is really about culture, and how do you develop a culture in the business? Culture is a very hard and amorphous thing to kind of develop, but the way that we simply espouse it to ourselves and talk about it and try to develop it is to say, let's just build somewhere that we want to turn up to every day, right? If I want to turn up to work every day, there's a pretty good chance that 250 other people want to turn up to work every day. If I think, geez, I've got to go to that place again, I would expect them to feel the same way. So we've worked really hard to build somewhere that we wanted to work and think, okay, if we wanted to work there, we're pretty reasonable people, well, some would say, and other people would want to turn up too. So this is really interesting. This is a different email that we got from actually someone who applied for a job and got turned down. But it was just interesting. I thought that he thought that we had such high caliber applications that his had to be discontinued. So let's talk about values for a second. One of the most interesting things we've done, I think, was about probably 4 or 5 years ago, we introduced corporate values, right? Now, 8 years ago, I would have told you values, let's just build some software. But over time, I've realized how important they are, right? The founder's values really imbue into the first 10 or 20 employees, almost by osmosis. You don't even have to think about it. As the business starts to scale up, you really have to scale those values out, and you have to codify them. So we ran a little exercise, or actually a number of little exercises internally, and what we really didn't want to do was write down a set of values that A, were kind of things that people would forget, and B, were things that weren't values we actually held, right? They weren't already in the business. We didn't want to espouse to be something in the future. We wanted to say, what are we now that we want to keep and maintain? So we ran this exercise. We had various different things. There's a Jim Collins exercise about which 5 people would you send to the moon and then why if you had to rebuild the business. There's a whole bunch of different exercises you can say to sort of tease these things out. The key point is they're the values that you already hold and then writing them down so you make sure that the business holds them for a long time. You can scale the founders, if you like, to more people. I'll just put them up. So what was interesting is we ran this exercise twice, once with management and once with some old-time employees, right? And there was about like an 85% overlap between the two groups. When they came up with their list of 5 things and then they both put them up on the wall, everyone looked at them and went, I think we must have the right list here because everyone wrote the same thing. So they're pretty simple. We tried to make them very honest, right? People very protective of these. And the one thing that values are good at is determining who should work at your company and who shouldn't. So we have them up on pretty much every wall in meeting rooms and all over the place. And hopefully your values will self-select people into your business. People turn up to us, they have an interview, and they either walk away and thinking, I'm not working somewhere like that, or they think, that is totally the company for me. And the people who think, if we've got the list of values right, and they think that's totally the company for me, then they're the type of people that we want to work here. So I probably won't explain them. Grab me for a beer and I'll take you through them all.
And lastly, a tenet that I hold true is give people experiences. Don't give people money to reward them. Don't give them a pat on the back. Give them an experience, something that they'll remember. And we've done that. We've given employees holidays away instead of just saying, here's a little bonus for the hard work. How about you take you and your wife overseas, or we didn't send them overseas, but away for a weekend and have a good holiday on us. But we're also known particularly for our end of financial year parties. For us, we couldn't afford a black tie dinner. But what we could afford was to put together an experience that people would remember. So our first mission at Atlassian, as we called it, was basically people came in, they knew that we had an event on, but they just got told to turn up in this meeting room at a certain time at 8 a.m. in the morning. And all the other rooms were sort of locked off with, do not come in tape. And they sat down in front of a projector, and just at a certain time, the projector went off, and here's what they saw.
Hello everyone, Em here. You have been enlisted by MI6 to help with some troubling developments in your part of the world. For some time we've noticed things going awry down under, and now we feel that the time has come for us to step in and put you back on track. A senior defector within the Australian Parliament has provided...
Anyway, so that basically zooms into to Sydney, and people didn't know it at the time, but it actually zoomed into exactly where they needed to go for this chase around the city. But of course, no one worked that out, and which is good because otherwise they wouldn't have been as much of a chase. And throughout the day, though, we had to go and see certain places. So one of them was going to the state library, and you had to follow a sort of line on the floor to a bookshelf and get the 3rd book from the end and find the 43rd word and the 15th page, and then that would take you a clue to somewhere else all the way through the library. And eventually there was a bank of lockers. I don't know if you've been to a pool where you put your stuff in the locker and they give you those codes. And basically you ended up with a 6-digit code which told you which locker to go to and which code to unlock it. And in there was the clue to take you to the next place. And then went throughout the city, and that was fantastic, a lot of planning. But the thing that we surprisingly found was the best part of the day was we gave people these, they had to take photographs of certain actions. And one of them was sharing food with a stranger. One of them was take a photo with a policeman, and someone combined that too, so sharing food with a policeman. We had, to get a photo holding the Opera House up. Driving in the front seat of a cab was a great one. You had to convince the cab driver to get out and that you weren't going to drive away with his cab and get a photo in it. And finally, you can see we gave everyone T-shirts at the end of the day, and everyone had a fantastic day. We've since run other events where people get experiences. Here the founders, that's myself, juggling, and we give people experiences they wouldn't normally do. So we basically had a circus day. We took everyone out. They got to learn how to ride a unicycle, learn how to juggle, learn how to use the static trapeze, and then everyone had a fantastic time. So just want to go through the 10 things we've learned starting a startup company, and thank you very much for having us today.